do know that the reception in other field has been quite good. The way it
Okay.
works is um, there's a HIPAA compliant, app on the phone. The doctor press record, and you and I just have a conversation. And you look at the doctor's eyes, and he or she interacts with you in a much more pleasant manner instead
Yeah.
of just typing. The patient really should not notice any adverse effects of this technology. If anything, from what I've heard, and definitely some of the studies show that they enjoy the experience more because now the doctor is actually
Paying attention.
paying attention.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's also good evidence that documentation transcribed by the scribing, AI scribing, it's more complete and comprehensive than what we write down afterwards.
Okay.
So you can actually capture more problems that the patient mentioned in a given encounter, which I think is also a good thing.
In this groundbreaking episode, we're diving deep into the future of eye care with a true innovator at the forefront of artificial intelligence in healthcare. We're thrilled to welcome Dr. Alvin Liu, a renowned retinal specialist and the inaugural director of the new AI Innovation Center at Johns Hopkins Medicine. Dr. Liu is an interdisciplinary strategist specializing in the practical application and scaling of healthcare AI technologies. Join us as he illuminates how advancements like deep learning and autonomous AI are transforming everything from diabetic retinopathy screening to hospital operations. Discover why the retina is such a critical canvas for AI innovation, what it takes to implement these cutting-edge tools in a clinical setting, and the crucial work being done on AI governance at both the health system and national levels. You don't want to miss this essential discussion on how technology is reshaping ophthalmology and the delivery of patient care. Please welcome Dr. Alvin Liu. And as always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Podcast Wise for more perspectives on healthcare and technology.
How are you doing today?
Doing quite well. Thanks for asking.
Today, we're going to talk about AI and ophthalmology. I always have this problem with this word. I'll learn it today. So tell me, you are a specialized eye doctor
Correct.
and you are also a photographer.
Mhm.
How does that passion for photography help you see and understand the pictures of retina when you look at an everyday thing?
So first of all, thank you so much for having me. Yes, you're correct. I'm an ophthalmologist, so I'm a doctor that specializes in taking care of the eye. I also received additional training in vitreoretinal surgery. So retina is actually the back of the eye, and it does have something to do with, my personal hobby, which, as you mentioned, one of which is photography. I grew up at a time early enough such that we were still using cameras with films. So a good analogy is that the retina is the film in the camera. So if the retina doesn't work, if the retina doesn't work, then you won't be able to take any pictures. And similarly, in the age of digital photography, the analogy is retina is a computer chip inside a digital camera. So again, it's a very critical part of the eye. And if the retina doesn't work, you really can't see well. And it's one of the only part of the eye where we cannot replace it. So, for example, everyone is born with a clear lens inside the eye when you were first born. And over time, this lens becomes a little bit less clear, and that's what we call cataracts. And you can certainly do cataract surgery and replace the cloudy lens. And similarly, the front part of the eye, the clear part, is called the cornea. Again, if something happens to the cornea, we can perform surgery called a corneal transplant to replace it. However, unfortunately, for retina, we can't really replace it right now. And so it really is very critical. And there are many reasons why we cannot replace the retina. Part of it is because it's highly complex. It's actually a direct extension of your brain. So when you were a baby, you're growing up as an embryo inside your mother's womb, you can actually track the early brain development, and you will see a direct extension of your brain, which eventually becomes your retina.
Oh, that's pretty cool. Now, tell me, with the similarities of photography and the retina, what do you see the similarities of both the pictures and the human eye?
Great question. I think I can answer this question two different ways. Maybe let me take a step back and explain how I got into ophthalmology in the first place. So when I was in medical school, very early on, I realized that I really liked to do surgery. And as a first-year medical student, one of the critical classes that we did was anatomy. So we needed to understand like different parts of human body. Very soon I realized I was very interested in anatomy from the neck up.
Mm.
So, and I also knew that I want to be a surgeon. So that really meant I could either be a neurosurgeon or ENT or ophthalmology. And through different exploration, I ended up deciding on ophthalmology, partly is because I do think, and I hope you agree, that being able to see is very important. So I think that's a very important function. It really does matter to people's quality of life. So I decided to go into ophthalmology. And once I decided that, then I knew right away I wanted to be a retinal surgeon because, as I mentioned earlier, the retina was such a critical part of the eye. And I want to be involved in, taking care of patients with retina problems specifically. And that's sort of the connection between, the retina and the eye and how I decided to become a retinal specialist to begin with. The story of the retina and visual information also played a part later in my career. So towards the end of my training, I decided to enter academia, so Johns Hopkins University. And typically how it works in academia is that we have to pick something to focus in. And for me, as you know, is artificial intelligence. If you look at the history of artificial intelligence, the current cutting edge technique is called deep learning. And it first came onto the scene about 10 years ago. And the initial prominent application is in image analysis. And it is still widely used in image and video analysis right now. The interesting thing about the connection between the retina and AI is that when the computer scientists tried to come up with a better way to analyze images, they took inspiration from how our brain process visual information. That's how they got inspired to design a particular architecture called the deep neural network.
Okay.
So one could argue that the rise of modern AI really is intimately related to the field of ophthalmology and specifically retina.
That's cool. So I understand also in the AI world with in the healthcare specifically for like mammograms, right? Like being able to search for a cancer cell. My understanding from previous conversations with you, you've stated that that can also be done with the retina scans. Am I correct?
Not in the case of, breast cancer specifically. I can talk about deep learning based image analysis broadly in two different categories. The first category is doing things that humans can already do. So, for example, like I'm a retina specialist. One of the things that I do is look at someone's retina, and diabetes is a big problem in the US and around the world. And so, diabetic retinopathy is a very common disease. Diabetic retinopathy simply means diabetes involvement in the back of the eye, which is also the number one reason why for working age people could go blind. So it is recommended that if you have diabetes, you're supposed to go see an ophthalmologist once a year to detect these signs earlier rather than later. So of course, as a human, like I can look at someone's retina and say whether there's diabetic retinopathy or not. However, as you can imagine, doing this screening at scale on a population level, it's very time consuming. And even in the US, only about 50% of the people undergo the screening on a regular basis. So AI can certainly screen these patients, look at these retinal images in a more efficient manner. And in fact, this is particular indication was the first ever medical AI device approved by the FDA back in 2018. So this is an example of AI doing something that humans can do already when it comes to image analysis, but just in a much more efficient manner. The second category is for AI to look at a particular image to figure out something that humans can never, ever figure out, like what I call superhuman capability. And I'll give you a few examples. Right now, you can present a retinal image to AI, and without knowing anything about you, the program can predict your age, biological sex, whether you smoke cigarettes or not, your blood count, and even, whether you're at a elevated risk for having heart attack in the future, whether you have kidney disease. So all these things. So we, as a field now, is moving towards the second category, which is really taking advantage of AI models performing superhuman tasks. Another really interesting example is in pathology. So pathology is a field where doctors look at certain kind of tissues, cancer, whatnot. It's a very common thing for pathologists to look at patients with potential cancers. For example, to determine what kind of cancer it is. And then also pathologists can add different kinds of staining to really subtype the cancer. What AI can do now is just simply look at the original slide and be able to predict the underlying genetic mutation. Again, this is another example of superhuman capability. No one
Right.
can ever do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like taking well, I don't know if we want to say that, but like taking, those DNA tests, but going to the eye doctor ophthalmologist to get it done to see what your future does look like, right?
Yep,
Yeah, that's
for
pretty
sure. Yeah.
cool. That's pretty cool. So, in your background, like you said earlier, that you grew up not in the United States, in Hong Kong specifically. How has that experience from moving from Hong Kong to the US helped you connect with your clients, your
So
patients?
Hong Kong is an interesting place. So historically, it's always been thought of as the place that bridges the East and the West.
Mm.
So growing up, I think that has always been a very strong part of my identity, which is that I'm always the in-between person between different societies, between different cultures. And that identity got reinforced once I moved to the US. I've been in US since I was 15. I went to a boarding school called Phillips Exeter Academy, and I stayed in the US afterwards for all my education training and working. So despite that, I still have a lot of family members and friends back in Hong Kong and in Asia overall. So even though I've been living here for almost 25 years, my identity has remained the same in the sense that I always felt like I'm most comfortable being the in-between person. Like I understand both worlds. I never fully belong to a one particular world 100%, but I always have really enjoyed being the in-between person. I think this has shaped how I interact with patients, thought about like healthcare AI and thought about the business of medicine overall, because ultimately, no matter where you go and what you do, you will be interacting with a diverse set of characters. I
Mhm.
think by being this in-between person my entire life really taught me the importance of listening to all the parties involved and just understand that there's no one right view. And ultimately, everything in life is about a set of compromises that hopefully creates a win-win situation for everyone involved. So that's in general how approach, especially difficult issues in life.
Yeah. And I mean, in healthcare, there's always some challenge that you have to face, especially like when you talk to different types of people,
Mhm.
right? So it's challenging sometimes, but sometimes it's very rewarding.
Yeah, for sure. And I think this perspective has been especially important and helpful when we navigate the world of healthcare AI and what that means for medicine, because AI is definitely changing everything as we know it, including
Mhm.
medicine. And this, in particular, it would change how medicine is delivered and the business of medicine. In this changing process, a lot of stakeholders are involved and will be involved. And oftentimes, if we don't consider the incentives of all stakeholders from day one and ensure at least some kind of alignment from day one, oftentimes these initiatives will fail.
Yeah. As an expert in AI, how do you personally use AI in your life?
Great question. I think with the rise of generative AI, especially large language models, our world is changing very fast and will be very different. For me personally, I actually have been on the sideline until about 6 months ago. I think what really changed about 6 months ago was the rise of reasoning large language models that can perform much better thinking. Granted, it's not perfect, but it's way more powerful when it comes to complex planning than before. So a lot of times when I think about certain kinds of topic, I have certain views. And now the way that I use generative AI, essentially deep research mode, is to really give it very specific instructions and very specific first principle thinking, first principles that came from my personal observations of my personal goals, and then have it either critique those first principle thinking, see whether it makes sense or not, or create certain kind of proposals based on my own, first principle thinking or like important things like guidelines. The net result is that I've been a lot more efficient. I can go through a lot more content a lot faster. And more importantly, really Gen AI can really access sources within the internet that I can't.
Hmm.
And it really made me a better human.
Well, yeah. Well, that's the thing. Like with AI, it is not. A lot of people think it's a replacement, but I believe it's more like an additive, right?
Correct.
It's making you better. It's just, in a previous podcast, I stated that it is not replacing your critical thinking, but more so make you think about something else,
Right.
right?
I think that's a very good point. I mean, there are many ways to AI, and I'm sure different people with different viewpoints. I would say that, AI is good enough nowadays and definitely going forward that if one were to use Gen AI to replace one's own critical thinking, that you're in trouble.
Yeah.
There are a lot of issues with that. But the people who don't become lazy and really look at AI as a way to enhance their critical thinking and allow them to ask a second set of questions will be the ones who will be able to successfully integrate AI into their day-to-day lives.
Yeah. I totally agree with that.
So it's a matter of being lazy or not. It really is. Yes.
Yeah. Now, tell me, you studied something called oculomics. Can you explain what that is and how it uses the pictures to learn about a person's overall health, as you stated earlier?
Yes, this is something that we touched on a little bit earlier today. Essentially, oculomics is a field that studies the association between ophthalmic and most often retinal findings and systemic health. This field is not brand new per se. The idea has been around for a very long time. So, for example, for decades, we know that if your blood pressure remains very high and uncontrolled for a very long time, we do see signs of that in the retina. So, for the longest time, we do understand that there are a lot of associations between the retina and the rest of the body. It's just that two things really changed in the past few years. Number one, imaging technique has improved a lot, meaning we can get very, very high resolution of the retina. For example, in some of the ophthalmic retinal imaging modality, the resolution is about 1,000 times higher than your typical brain MRI. Again,
Wow.
the retina is a direct extension of the brain, but using when we image the retina, it could go up to 1,000 times better than a brain MRI. So imaging got a lot better. And the second thing that changed was the advancement of AI, especially deep learning. So essentially, we are now collecting a lot more information because of better hardware. And once we collected the data, we can analyze that data a lot better and deeper using these newer AI techniques. The net result is that the associations that we can now make between retina and the rest of the body is a lot more useful. Then these associations also create actionable insights that then we can do something about. Yeah.
That makes sense.
And I can actually also add, going into a little bit more specific. I mean, I gave some examples in terms of what we can predict from the retina. In more practical terms, and going even one level deeper, three categories of disease that now we can predict. The first one is cardiovascular. Second one is what we call neurodegenerative. The third one's kidney disease. So when it comes to cardiovascular, what we really mean is we can predict whether you're at higher risk for a future major cardiovascular event such as a heart attack. When it comes to neurodegenerative diseases, the most prominent example is dementia or Alzheimer's. We're not as good as Parkinson's. And when it comes to kidney disease, we can also predict whether you have or at a high risk of having what we call like a chronic kidney disease, meaning like a chronic level of kidney dysfunction.
That's cool. Now, how would a patient get those kind of scans?
So right now, what would require that to happen is really go to a place where you can get your retinal images taken. The good news is a lot of these technologies do not require new hardware. When it comes to retinal cameras, these really are off-the-shelf, commercially available retinal cameras. Now, in real life, most of these cameras really sit within the offices of ophthalmologists or retinal specialists. So, and the second thing that needs to happen is once the image is taken, the images need to be analyzed by a commercial ready software. So we are still a little bit early in the commercial real-world implementation, but there are companies that are doing that already. In the not so distant future, what needs to happen is for these cameras to be placed not only in the traditional healthcare settings, such as your ophthalmologist's office, but ideally also in literally the community. So I can imagine a world where you have a camera in your local Walmart, in your local supermarket, in your pharmacy. You go in there just like you go shopping every weekend,
Mhm.
you get your retinal images taken. And these images will be analyzed in real time by various AI models in the cloud. And within minutes, you get your results saying that, for example, hey, Finn, I'm glad you came in and got your pictures taken, but turns out that you are at an elevated risk for these conditions.
Right.
Now, you should really go see either your primary care or even better, go straight to a cardiologist, a neurologist, whatnot.
Yeah.
But that's very much a workflow issue. It will vary by location, but that's the general idea. The general idea is like we want to do this kind of screening that is non-invasive and quick in the community outside of the traditional healthcare setting so that we can really screen the entire population.
Yeah. So just like the heart rate monitor that
Exactly.
you see at Safeway or
Exactly.
yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
That makes sense. Okay, so you are the new director of the AI Innovation Center. What's your big vision for the center and what kind of projects are you looking forward to do?
Okay. Thank you for bringing it up. This is something that we're really quite proud of. Maybe I will provide a little bit more context. So, this particular center was established approximately a year ago. It's called the Gills AI Center, and it was made possible by a very generous donation of $10 million by Dr. Gills, who was also an alumnus of Johns Hopkins Medicine, and he donated this money to set up the AI center. And fortunately, it was also the first ever endowed AI center at the Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine. The goal of this center is really accelerate and maximize the impacts of AI ophthalmology. With this in mind, there are several guiding principles for me to lead this center. Number one, we're going to make it open to all faculty members at the Wilmer Eye Institute, which is the ophthalmology department at Johns Hopkins University. The Wilmer Eye Institute is also the largest academic ophthalmology department in the country, and we have over 100 full-time faculty members. So there's a lot of research going on at Johns Hopkins. So principle number one, really make it available to everyone involved. And second principle is to really lay the infrastructure, the foundation behind AI innovation, which includes access to GPUs, access to funding, and access to computer science talent. One common issue when it comes to research overall, and definitely AI research, is you need a lot of upfront investment, right? You
Right.
probably need you need access to GPUs, which are not cheap. You need access to computer scientists who are in hot demand. And especially with capital expenditure of big techs, essentially there's a competition for resources in the AI field. So now with this donation, I can really plan things 5 years, 10 years ahead of time, and really, for example, have computer scientists on retainer, so to speak, or really uh, secure GPU access from the university cluster. So that's the second thing. And the third principle that really is guiding me in how to lead the center is think about collaboration in a different way. Historically, when you look at collaborations in academic setting, it really is collaboration between academic centers. Maybe like two professors get together, do some like research together. I mean, that is still very important. However, I do think that AI is advancing really fast. And when you look at healthcare AI, there are other very important stakeholders and players in the ecosystem that will be very important for us to engage with. For example, the government, big tech, startup companies, and venture capital funds. So I look at the ecosystem of AI more holistically, and I think there are a lot of other important partners other than academia that will have an outsized role in the advancement of AI. So it is my hope and my goal for this Gills AI Center to really actively engage with these other actors who may not be traditional partners with academia
Yeah.
on a long-term basis.
Yeah. So getting the different perspective and not just in academia.
Correct. And actually doing something with them. For example, collaboration with startups, collaboration with venture capital fund to see like where the innovation is and how we can bring it to market. So all these so-called non-traditional collaborations.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's pretty cool. Now, besides the diabetic retinopathy, how do you see AI changing the way we treat other eye diseases like macular degeneration?
So you mentioned the screening for diabetic retinopathy. That
Uh-huh.
certainly is an important use case. As I mentioned, it was the first ever AI-enabled medical device in any medical field that was approved by the FDA, and it was approved back in 2018. A recent study also showed that this particular indication is the second most deployed AI solution across medicines. That's a very good example. Going back to your point, what other like developments do I see? I see it in several different ways. First is ophthalmology, and definitely retina is very image dependent. So on a day-to-day basis, when we take care of patients and also in the research arena, we are always dealing with images. So very similar to radiology in that sense. And oftentimes when it comes to image analysis, not only we want to classify images into different categories, we also want to quantify things. For example, how big is a certain lesions? We will get down to the quantification, actual numbers. So deep learning is very good at quantifying things. And right now, for the most part, hopefully it is changing. For a lot of these really precise quantification is done by hand, which, as you can
Wow, that's
imagine,
tedious.
it's super tedious and just not scalable. So the first major application is just using deep learning to quantify whatever is important to you. The second important use case is in clinical trial recruitment. As you can imagine, like clinical trials are very important in advancing the frontier of medicine. That's how we show that certain medications are efficacious. That's how we bring new medications to market. However, the logistics of clinical trial is extremely, again, time consuming, labor intensive. You have to identify the right patients. And once you identify the patients, you need to do additional testing, make sure that they're eligible. And this is especially a problem when it comes to ophthalmology because, again, we're very image dependent. So just by looking at electronic health record, it's not enough to determine the ultimate eligibility because whether a patient is eligible or not, oftentimes depending on his or her images as well. So there are many ways where we can use AI to make clinical trial recruitment more efficient. So we are seeing that already. And I think in the next few years, AI application in clinical trial recruitment will really blossom. So clinical trials are very complicated logistically. Large language model in the form of agents can physically do a lot of the work behind the scene and makes things more efficient. And the third arena, it's in the back end of medicine. This is not just for ophthalmology, but for medicine overall, which is revenue cycle management. The vast majority of Americans have medical insurance. Typically, how it works is as a doctor, I see a patient, right? I document certain things. Maybe I provide an intervention. Then I will submit that claim to a medical insurance company and say, I did so X, Y, and Z for Ms. Smith, and that's how I get paid. So that's called revenue cycle management. Right now, it's very tedious, involves a lot of paperwork. So the industry that manages this revenue cycle management itself is about $200 billion per year. So
Wow.
each year in the US, we spend $200 billion per year just to do the paperwork and make sure that doctors get paid accordingly. A lot of that workflow can be automated using Gen AI, both definitely within ophthalmology and certainly outside of ophthalmology as well. So this is really a trend that's happening across healthcare, not just in ophthalmology.
So basically helping streamline the admin work.
Correct. And it has real implications for patients. So oftentimes, if you're a patient, you go to see a doctor and the doctor decides that you need certain kind of treatment, you will need to submit what we call prior authorization. So you
Right.
need prior authorization from the insurance company and said, yes, then you can get this particular treatment. That process can be automated or made more efficient, which should translate into like a shorter delay between the submission of the prior authorization and you getting the treatment that you need.
Yeah.
So that's great. And then on the back end, and oftentimes if paperwork is not done correctly, the claim itself may get denied. Again, that can be helped out with Gen AI and everything in between.
Because I have experience where I needed to go to the specialized doctor and then I had to get special permission,
Yes.
right, from my primary care physician first.
Mhm.
I had to go see them first,
Mhm.
and then they say, okay, well, we discussed it, and then now you can get a referral, and then you can go see your specialist.
Right.
I'm like, this is tedious for me. I'm like, I need to go to like 2 places just to get a referral, and then go to my specialized doctor because I'm on PPO or something
Yeah,
like
yeah.
that. Yeah, well, no, HMO.
No.
Yeah,
And then, just using your experience as example, a lot of things happen behind the scene too, because now your primary doctor needed to submit something to an insurance company and say, and deserves to see a specialist, and
right.
that requires some approval. And then once, let's say you saw your specialist, the specialist said, oh, Thin needs this treatment again, like he or she, probably applied for some approval as well. So, like, it certainly was inconvenient from your perspective. There are a lot of back end work that those doctors need to do. And
Yeah,
all of that could be, made more efficient and less painful with Gen AI. And so, in the aggregate, there are many points along your healthcare journey that could be made much better with Gen AI. And then hopefully, eventually, you will see the net result and feel the convenience.
yeah, yeah. I totally agree. I hope that comes soon.
Yes.
All right. Okay, so you work at the crossroad of new technology and hospital system. How do you help new tech companies understand what doctors and hospitals really need?
I think that's a great question. What I see in the innovation scene, and it's not, it's both on the university side, people do original research, and also in the startup scene, like, outside third party companies. One of the big issues is they're very good innovators and they love inventing new things, which is very important. But then they ended up working on something that should not be worked on in the first place. Like they may end up, a shiny new toy will not get deployed unless it's actually useful. I think there are two main things that any innovator should think about, especially in the healthcare space. Number one is the end user. So one can never get the product market fit on day one. It's just physically impossible. But it's very important for the innovators to engage with end users from day one. And so that through that iterative process, their product or their invention will have buy-in from the end user. Meaning, if it's an instrument, you really want to talk to the surgeon using it and say, yes, if you invent this thing and it gets approved, I'll actually pay you
Yeah.
and use it. S- Having product market fit is important, and especially you need to identify the right end user and get feedback from that end user from day one. The second very important thing to think about, and that's especially true for AI, is who's going to pay for what. The vast majority of healthcare services in the US is driven by a billing practice called a CPT code. So you go to a doctor's office, that office visit is documented and captured using a CPT code. And for any kind of like medicine, any kind of like surgeries and interventions. So essentially, if you have a healthcare AI service, but it's not, does not fit, like cannot be reimbursed using a CPT code, there's basically no way for you to get paid unless you have such a compelling product that patients are willing to pay cash and out of pocket. That's an extreme case. And honestly, it won't really work. What that means is you have to, if you're a healthcare AI innovator, you have to think about who's going to reimburse you to begin with. Typically, that requires thinking through the CPT code issue, meaning, can you use any of the existing CPT codes to pay for your service?
Okay.
And since AI is so new, the answer is usually no. Then that means that you have to go to the American Medical Association to lobby to establish a new CPT code. Even if you manage to do that, then you have to convince the payers to pay for the CPT code. Even if you manage to do that, you still have to convince the payers to reimburse your new CPT code at a level that's financially viable for you going forward. So this is like hugely complex, takes many, many years. So you are in trouble if you don't think about this until a later stage. This, again, should be one of the questions that you should be thinking about on day one, because it takes such a long time to even figure it out. So
Yeah.
I think these are two pitfalls that I see a lot in the innovation space, especially in the healthcare AI innovation space.
Okay, that's very insightful. Now, can you explain the difference between artificial intelligence and augmented intelligence, and how does those ideas guide your work?
They really are describing very similar things, to be honest. So the idea of artificial intelligence has been around for decades. It's simply our attempt to design a machine that thinks and acts like human. And there are two general forms, general and AI. So general in artificial intelligence, you can think of it as the Terminator movie series, the robot. Like, the robot can do many things, so that's general intelligence. For narrow AI, it means we're trying to train an AI system to do something very well, very narrow. So there's the Deep Blue, the chess machine. That's a good example of narrow AI. And even for a lot of the healthcare AI applications now, the diabetic retinopathy screening part is narrow AI. It's
Okay.
just trained to do one thing.
Mhm.
So that's the broad differentiation at the AI level. So machine learning is a subtype of AI, and it's a little bit newer, but it's still been around for a very long time. Essentially, what it does is in machine learning, we're trying to train AI systems with a lot of data so that it can start making predictions without us telling it specifically what to predict every single time. So fewer handwritten, hand-holding rules, but more, hey, this is a bunch of data, go figure out a pattern, come up with some predictions that's correct. So that's machine learning. And deep learning is a specific kind of machine learning that really came about 10 years ago, and it's very good at two things. One is image recognition, which we talk about, and the second one is understanding human language.
Okay.
So that like large language model is a type of deep learning. So AI is a very general term. Augmented intelligence simply means we're combining AI and human intelligence. And for all intents and purposes, that will be the way going forward, because I cannot imagine a world where AI is completely autonomous in the majority of use cases. I think we will see some autonomous use cases, for example, in driving, in autonomous drones. So we will see some autonomous use cases for sure. However, in the specific context of healthcare, since it's such a high stake field, like people die if you do something wrong,
Right.
for cultural and legal reason, I think the vast majority of the AI applications going forward, and even now, will involve human in the loop, and that's what we call assistive AI versus autonomous AI. And assistive AI basically is augmented intelligence, where you combine AI and human intelligence, and we work in tandem. Which I think is a good idea, to have a human in the loop somehow
Yeah.
and not be completely autonomous.
Yeah. So basically, the trust but verify application to AI.
Correct.
All right. Now, you've used AI to help with hospital administration. What are some of the non medical problems in healthcare you think that AI is best at solving? Right. So we talked earlier about, some of the administration work
Right.
for the coding and stuff like that. So what other application do you see?
So broadly speaking, there are many applications. And here's another statistics for you. Each year we spend about $4 trillion in healthcare right now, which is by far the largest sector of the economy in the US. And for context, what we spend on healthcare each year is bigger than Germany's entire GDP per year. That's
Wow.
how much money we spend on healthcare. Unfortunately, if you look at that $4 trillion expenditure per year, about 25% to 30% of it can be considered waste. And that's well published in the literature.
Wow.
So each year, basically, we're throwing away like $1 trillion. And there are many different kinds of ways. Administrative inefficiency is a huge category of it. Pretty much every single aspect of healthcare operations that's back end that involves any kind of paperwork, any kind of text, can be addressable using Gen AI. The most prominent example really is revenue cycle management, and we talked about that briefly already. And it's scaling the fastest also because this particular backend operation is directly linked to a dollar sign, right?
Right.
So there's it's a much easier to calculate the financial ROI in investing in Gen AI for RCM purposes. And also it gets the most attention from the CFOs. So that's why this particular application, it's getting a lot faster. Other examples of Gen AI approaches include care coordination. So let's say you are hospitalized for whatever reason, you have 5 appointments you need to show up to after you get discharged from hospitals. That backend coordination can certainly be addressed by Gen AI. Another example is scribing. So oftentimes, if you have been to a doctor, unfortunately, oftentimes your doctor's probably typing somewhere, right?
Yeah.
Because electronic health record is such a big part of the US healthcare system, and we didn't really sign up to be a doctor to type. And Gen AI in the form of scribing is really helpful. And I think it's really scaling across the country as well. And this technology is great because you and I can have a normal conversation just like in the office setting, just in a clinic setting, just like we're chatting right now. And I don't have to worry about typing. I can
Yeah.
actually look you in the
Yeah,
eyes and like
exactly.
figure out
Yeah.
your emotions and see what are you thinking. And in the background, the scribe listens in and just summarize all the information
Yeah.
in a very nice way. So that's a great example of Gen AI that's being deployed right now that's actually having a positive impact on the patient experience. So I think those are like care coordination, revenue cycle management, and scribing. Um, 3 prominent examples
Yeah.
on on the operational side. And the fourth one I would say is call center. Call center, not just in healthcare, but just across all industries. If you, let's say, call a restaurant for a reservation now, especially if you call a restaurant that's part of a bigger restaurant group, oftentimes you'll hear someone on the other end of the phone. I encourage you to listen very carefully. It actually sounds really good, much better than the robotic sound that we heard about probably 5 years ago. But a lot of these native voice AI agents can really converse with you now. They do sound a little bit different if you listen very carefully, but I think the technology is quite mature in answering a lot of the routine questions, not just in a healthcare setting, for example, trying to get an appointment for yourself, but also broadly in the call center field across all industries.
Have you experienced the scribe part of things where there was how would the patient, how does that experience for them? Like, have you got any pushback from that?
I personally have not used a lot of it, simply because I'm a retinal surgeon. A lot of my notes are very, very short, and it's a very specific problem, right? You come to me, you have a retina problem, this is how I'm going to solve it, which is in contrast to, let's say, you see your internal medicine doctor. There are a lot more things you address. It's a much longer conversation. Sometimes you spend 20, 30 minutes for an internal medicine visit versus a retinal surgeon. Like if you go to a retinal surgeon, the visit's a lot quicker. I'll give you a sense. I see 60 patients a day.
Wow.
So you can see like the amount of time I end up spending on each patient. So
Yeah.
that's my long way of saying that the scribing experience, like I don't really use a lot of it because of what I do. However, I do know that the reception in other field has been quite good. The way it
Okay.
works is there's a HIPAA compliant, app on the phone. The doctor press record, and you and I just have a conversation. And you look at the doctor's eyes, and he or she interacts with you in a much more pleasant manner instead
Yeah.
of just typing. The patient really should not notice any adverse effects of this technology. If anything, from what I've heard, and definitely some of the studies show that they enjoy the experience more because now the doctor is actually
Paying attention.
paying attention.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's also good evidence that documentation transcribed by the scribing, AI scribing, it's more complete and comprehensive than what we write down afterwards.
Okay.
So you can actually capture more problems that the patient mentioned in a given encounter, which I think is also a good thing.
That's true because I feel like when I go to one of my specialized doctor, he's always typing, and I'm like, dude, like talk to me. But
Exactly,
he's
yeah.
typing, and I'm like, I could barely understand what you're saying over your typing because you hear the click, 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 and I'm like, But I would like for them to get describing. That would be great.
This is definitely a silver lining in the AI revolution because I think if you look across the country right now, this particular technology, AI scribing, is scaling really, really fast. So I think in the very near future, this will be the standard experience. So I think the majority of doctors you go to, except for maybe when you come see me, will have a scribing service. Hopefully that would translate into a much better experience for you.
All right. So I think we covered everything, and I just want to thank you for coming today. And it was great, insightful discussion. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I've really enjoyed our conversation as well.
Thank you.